Welcome to a noob's guide to SETTRA the Imperishable. This is SETTRA the Great King, the Imperishable, the Hemrihara, the Great King of Nehihara, King. These titles go on for a while, so I'm just gonna move on. SETTRA is the bone pimp daddy with the spinning rims, who rolls up on 40s and rolls over anyone he comes across to Tokyo drift his way to victory. As the real star of the Tomb King's DLC for Total War Warhammer II, he'll have you grinding up dead mummies to make a mountain of white mummy powder so big it would make even Scarface blush. Tomb Kings are the reanimated husks of dried out rich guys who send their subjects to fight never-ending wars, all to reclaim the glories of Lost Empire. So, you know, it's nice Warhammer finally included a real-world faction. The Tomb Kings culturally appropriated mummies, the pyramid, the Nemesis headdress, and that stick-on chin beard thing that makes you look like you have a dildo on your face. Once a flourishing civilization that spent a few thousand years T-posing on Egyptian culture, for the Tomb Kings it was all sunny skies, green fields, and used sarcophagus salesmen, until one of their priest kings freebased a mountain of warpstone to kill everything that evolved past single-celled organisms. And then he reattached their souls to cue an endless civil war between pharaohs with 1,000 years of sand built up in every crevice imaginable, all to prove who had the biggest testicles before they died, then had them cut off and put in Canopic jars. Canopic jars, for those of you who haven't played Assassin's Creed Origins, store the important bits of you removed after mummification, a process that entails cutting your corpse from junk to jugular and removing all the squishy bits found inside. They then removed the brain by shoving a long, thin hook up your nostril like that scene from Total Recall, and then finally, you'd be pumped full of whatever embalming liquid you could afford and wrapped in the ancient equivalent of clingy saran wrap for fresh keeping, while your newly external organs were laid out beside you in 4 pieces of ancient Tupperware. It's these Canopic jars that form the main currency of the Tomb Kings in-game. You gain them by killing things and harvesting their organs like a Tijuana chop shop. You then use these alongside rare resources you capture on the map to unlock advanced units, regiments of renown, arms, and armor. But that part about the pickled penises wasn't entirely true. In mummification, they would most often just remove the genitalia entirely and then replace it with an exaggerated golden version that stood up at a 90-degree angle, because nobody wants to go to the afterlife with a tiny, flaccid, shriveled mummy junk. But the man with the biggest pyramid, the fanciest Canopic jars, and an entire separate sarcophagus just to hold his enormous golden appendage was SETTRA the Imperishable. Previously spared from never-ending undeath by his gigantic, magically encased pyramid in Hemri, the current Grand Hierophant of the mortuary cult broke the freshness seal to finally answer who was the biggest badass in their history. SETTRA is one of the only lords in Warhammer history that even Games Workshop admitted needed a rewrite, so they retconned him from being an oppressive pharaoh tyrant who overtook the world by ruthlessly exploiting his own people, to now become a ruthless tyrant who overtook the world by oppressing his own people. But this time, they loved him for it. Probably because SETTRA is will incarnate. These same cults of personality are what led the Macedonians to the Hindu Kush and Michael Jordan to believe that he can actually act in Space Jam. Hold on, I think SETTRA's full list of titles is about to end, so let's tune in for the exciting finale. Carrion Master, Eternal Warden of Nehek's lands, Breaker of Jaff's bonds, and many, many more. You know, this is actually a bit awkward for me. I thought this was going to last the entire video, but the segue out of this awkward pause is brought to you by lamp. Not this lamp, obviously. This lamp is clearly broken, which is why I got a new lamp. A fancy LED one from BenQ, with capacitive touch controls, that allows you to not only adjust the brightness and color temperature of the light, but also includes an automatic brightness adjusting feature, which is especially handy if you're like me and work in a government office with automatic light sensors. All while conveniently mounted on top of your monitor, handy and out of the way, and powered by only USB. It's so easy, even I can use it, and a 4-year-old can use it, and a 10-month-old can use it, and a dog can use it. So clearly, you can also use it. So if you're ready to clear off some desk space, try this new lamp from BenQ, which I'll link in the description below. During a drought in their home of Nehehara when he was still alive, and that's Nehehara with a silent K you'll continue to not hear, Settra sacrificed his own children to appease the gods and bring rain. When faced with overwhelming odds, he would charge his chariot directly into the enemy. And when he had finally conquered every tribe of man, all the way to the Black Mountains, he roared with rage to discover that the world kept going and he could not conquer it all in a single lifetime. This realization, of course, brought on a full-blown midlife crisis. Settra bought a Dodge Charger, got into CrossFit, and started his own craft brewery, while funding a mortuary cult of pseudoscience to begin the search for eternal life. But no amount of Gwyneth Paltrow's goop could forestall the inevitable truth: that getting old sucks. And then he died, and came back again. Now, at the game's start, Settra is poised to sweep aside the pretender Tomb Kings and reunite Nehehara under his bony boot heel as the reign of a million years begins. But your early game as Settra is all about recolonization and putting Khemri. God damn it. Imagine you have a hairball in the back of your throat and you're going the entire time. That's what recording this shit is like. And you can thank fellow YouTuber Party Elite for that linguistic quirk. And since he's a tiny tanned man of unclear ethnic origins, you know you can trust him to pronounce them foreign words. By far the most unique thing about every Tomb Kings campaign is that the armies you'll be fielding are entirely free to recruit, and they require no upkeep, since dead men tell no tales and also require no food, health insurance, or hooker allowance. The great Tomb Kings all had their best soldiers buried alive with them, so as you reclaim Khemri, you'll basically be liberating these guys from their eternal prisons. And it's only by expanding your empire and re-excavating these lost complexes that you unlock the most elite units to recruit, which is a story I just made up, as it sounds a lot better than Creative Assembly wanted to cap recruitment and couldn't be asked to give a lore reason why you're not instantly allowed to recruit a Doomstack whenever you want. In the meanwhile, you'll have to make do with your endless army of Darkness extras. These units are so cheap that they couldn't even be bothered to wrap themselves in toilet paper like proper mummies, and the only thing they're good for is giving enemy armies a convenient place to wipe their keisters. But the entirety of Settra's playstyle depends on these nobodies taking 90% casualty, as that gives him the time he needs to circle around and ram their backdoors, and turn their formations from saluting the sun to downward facing doggy style, because chariots are Settra's thing. You can tell because he's supposed to be Egyptian, and Creative Assembly believes that every Egyptian in history rode around on chariots. Smiting some Israelites? Well, you'll need a chariot for that. Fighting Romans? Oh, that's a chariot too. Stealth operations against ISIS. Tactical chariots, brah. If you went to Creative Assembly's office in Horsham, you'd find every Egyptian programmer had chariot wheels on their desk, just to give it that touch of home. But when Settra awoke from his slumber and found a competing Tomb King, Orhan the Black, knocking on his tomb door, Settra proved he was not a mourning person by curb stomping this guy to pieces and tying his still sentient body to his chariot wheels. But just remember that unlike cavalry, you have to charge chariots in and then immediately pull out. Don't try for the rhythm method, don't wait around for the withdrawal, or you'll find that your guys have busted themselves all over the enemy. And the only chariot that can really raw dog them is the Bone Daddy himself, as Settra injects nitrous oxide directly into his fuel tank and unlocks his own unique race car mount that can only truly be revealed in a Top Gear montage. It's called the Chariot of the Gods. It has no brakes, the suspension is literally wooden, the steering is rubbish, and the driver doesn't even have eyes. But none of this matters because Settra does not swerve. Chariots really only work though if the enemy is already distracted, so Settra starts with two other units for the enemy to swarm onto. The first is a Khemrian War Sphinx, your friendly neighborhood danger kitty, who you'll use as a crutch all the way to turn 50 as he carries your sorry backside on his spacious granite shoulders. And if you hate yourself as a person, you can always put Settra on a War Sphinx. Sure, your undead lord will never be able to die, but at what cost? Accompanying this beast of a war sphinx are a unit of tomb guards, the personal posse of the pharaohs. Think of them as a skeletal 300, but with less man-on-man action. Because as Settra unlocks his personal abilities, you'll find these guys are more than an Egyptian-flavored meat wall. But even with these at your back, Settra's victory will only be complete when you gather together 5 cursed books of the vile sorcerer Nagash, otherwise known as the sorcerer who killed everyone in Nehechara and then raised them all back from the dead. You know, a total dick move. Once you regather his tainted library, which seems to entirely consist of cephalopods and Japanese schoolgirls, you'll bring them to the Black Pyramid of Nagash, where you'll recreate the spell that awoke all the Tomb Kings to undeath, except this time it'll be to put enough flesh on their bones they can be dummy thick enough to burst their bandages. Though I should point out that at this point in Warhammer lore, Nagash actually comes back from the dead and raffle stomps Settra's entire army, putting He of the Sweet Ride down on his knees before asking, out of admiration admittedly, if Settra would be willing to serve as Nagash's lieutenant. And if there's one thing we've learned in this video, it's that Settra does not serve, which meant that Frieza Nagash instantly lifted Settra into the air and Krillined him to death. Now a disembodied head, Settra had time to reconsider his position on servitude, and was eventually offered a new, juiced-up body to seek revenge by the gods of chaos. So when the end of the Warhammer world comes, Settra sets out to put 6 feet of Nehecharan hardwood through Nagash's eye socket and pimp-slap him back into his Black Pyramid, batting aside an actual mountain-sized god of thunder just to get the chance to stand beside Nagash and lift his Khopesh to deliver the final blow. And it's at this point, sword raised, that the Chaos Gods spoke again and ordered Settra to serve them and do the deed, which was exactly the wrong thing to say, as Settra does not serve. Settra rules, as he put a pause on killing Nagash to deal with a load of Chaos Gods who would dare tell him what to do. Settra is last seen Leroy Jenkinsing into a Chaos army, soloing them, and as the world winks out of existence, the final image of the Imperishable One is as he scales a Chaos Giant and embeds his halberd in its skull. So dust off your Dodge Chargers and spend way too much time talking about family, because the original guy who's fast and furious has come to town.